Hello, hello, Gutsy Women on this beautiful morning in the UK. It's 10 a.m. here, and I have the wonderful and lovely Marni Watson with me today. Well, it's not today, well, it is today for her, but it's very, very early today for her. She's sitting at work at the moment, and it's 2 a.m. where she is. So I am
It's
just
2 a.m.
in awe. I'm in awe of your strength and how absolutely gorgeous you look at 2 a.m. in the morning. I don't think I could even compete with that. So
Well,
thank you for being here, my love. Thank you.
you're welcome. 5 o'clock's a bit different, so 2 is so good. Yeah.
Okay. So Marni, you are here because I am fascinated with the work that you do. And I believe that there are lots of women within the Gutsy Women Collective who will have, like me, I had major, major issues with thinking around death and dying and all of the emotions that it would bring up for me, the fear around it, all of that kind of thing. And we don't realize how all these thoughts and feelings impact our physical health. So I'm so, so pleased that you're here today to talk about this topic, because I think there's lots of women in the group who will actually really, really benefit from that. So Marni, please tell us who you are and where you are and what brought you to doing this work, this type of work. What is it about this type of work that you love and find that's really important?
Sure. I am living, excuse me, I'm living on Vancouver Island in Canada. I live on the west coast of British Columbia. I have worked in like in a caring field for 25 years. I've looked after people. I've looked after mostly old folks in nursing homes and dementia care. And of course, if anybody knows what, nursing care is, it's pretty much, it's nursing home. So, I mean, you don't really go home, you live there. And I was experiencing, and prior to working in this field, I saw a lot of people off on their final journeys, and I had some family members pass away, and I had my mother pass away and her husband as well, my grandmother, and then I went into this field in my early 30s, and saw a lot of people off and experienced death lots and was so curious around it. And so when I got into being a death doula back in 2016, I had a friend reach out to me, and she said, you should check this out. It's a thing. And they're doing some training with this company. It comes up from the United States, and they come to Vancouver, and they train doulas, death doulas. And so I looked into it, and anyway, long story short, I did the training. And what I did learn in that training is they shared with us that all of us are really already doulas. We're already doing the work, especially with end of life care. We're with our families, we're with our friends, and we're with our grandmothers and grandfathers. And so it's just, and they reminded us, you don't need training. You really don't. You don't need any training. Everybody's already doing this. And so, and they just did a bunch of stuff to crack us open a bit, a lot. And so it was beautiful. And so I made some really close connections with some people, and am in contact with a lot of those people still today. One of them is my very best friend. And so anyway, it's quite a field to work in, and to be able to be with people in their dying. And also I've been really working a lot in planning, end of life planning and legacy planning, and starting conversations. I think that I've really tried to send the message out to the world that the most important thing you can do in your living is have a conversation about your dying. Because as we all know, especially as we get older, you don't know what's going to come tomorrow. Who knows? And so if you haven't had any conversations with anybody in your life, then that leaves a lot to be wondered about, and it creates a lot of family strife and trouble. And so that's pretty much what my message, especially of late, because I've encountered that a bit. My son went through something with his father's sudden passing, and there was no conversations. They were estranged, and so there wasn't even any notes or wills or information for him. So it's just yucky, when that happens. And so a lot of people don't want to have conversations about that. And so I feel positive about that. And I feel like I'm able to really help and assist people have conversations about that. I'm always open to talk about it at any time. So
Wow. I think as well that people, from my own experience, is that people feel like if they talk about it, it's kind of going to bring it closer.
yeah,
A lot of the
absolutely.
time. Yeah. So my next question for you is, when you do speak to people about death and dying and all of the things that are involved in that conversation, what things come up most around maybe the reasons why they don't speak about it?
I think you just touched on it, actually. People think that they're hexing it to happen faster, you know? They think that if they talk about it, it's gonna put some kind of spell or something, but they don't want to talk about that because it's awkward. If there's any generations below us, around us, talking about this, they don't want to talk about this. Some flat out won't, and a lot of it's fear. People don't want to feel uncomfortable, especially if they're younger. Older people, it's a different story. They're so past all that stuff. But yeah, I think that it's a lot of it's fear. I think a lot of belief systems. They think that maybe if we have a conversation about it, it's actually just going to bring it closer faster.
Mm.
So yeah, I really believe that. And a lot of people don't know how to start a conversation, because they think someone might think they're weird or dark or creepy or scary or witchy or woo-woo. They don't want to be involved with anything like that. And so sometimes I look at myself as a bridge,
Yeah.
bringing stuff up,
Yes.
bringing up the hard stuff.
Yeah, starting those difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. And the thing as well is that there's so much involved in, you talked about death planning. So
Mhm.
tell me about some of the topics that are involved in the death planning that people might actually be thinking about but not daring to speak about, because that can impact our mind-body connection as well.
Yeah. I mean, not, and really, I've talked about this before, where it's not necessarily like planning your funeral or, writing your eulogy or anything like that, or, talking, yeah, we can all talk about generalization about cremation or being buried. But some of the things that you just asked me, like some of the things that people are talking about are things like, um, like right to the simplest things, because that's the stuff that, you know, a family around a table in sudden grief say, and they're fighting about the smallest stuff, which can be the biggest thing to someone in their dying, or important to someone. Say your grandmother wanted, say, the certain white nightgown that she's had tucked away in her drawer for 35 years that she wore whenever, but it's important to her and she never talked about it. Just that kind of stuff. And then that kind of that kind of stuff can create such a swirl. So I'm talking about right down to the smallest little details that people don't want to even talk about because they think they're nothing, but there's something in big
Mm.
to somebody. And so another thing that we can talk about in death and dying is legacy work. A lot of people really feel that they don't look valued or they really feel that people in their lives, or that say someone that would come to their funeral, wouldn't know how much of an important life they led. And so you can do legacy work like that, and you can create just something in a legacy, just to hand to your family, that really showed who they are and who they were,
Mm,
and what they went through, and what kind of things they did,
mm,
and
mm.
whatever it might be, like travel work, whatever.
Yeah.
And so legacy work is quite something. It's a lot of deep diving into the deep end, and a lot of people do it in their living, which is super. It cracks you open, it cracks you wide open, especially when you don't have a diagnosis, but you're just doing this work. Because we did this like as a practicum when we were in the doula school, and it is eye-opening. And it's what's actually probably brought me closer to not feeling scared anymore,
Mm,
about my own mortality. It's really
yeah.
helped, because I was really scared.
Mhm,
But I jumped right off, and I just went into this training, and some of the stuff we did was just wild, and
mhm.
it's beautiful, just really beautiful.
It sounds beautiful, because I'm thinking of my own losses, and it's kind of like, one was a very sudden loss, completely unexpected, and that wrecked me basically. For about 7 years, it took me to actually emerge. I was like one of those flowers that only flower once every 15 years or something, from the Amazon jungle. It was like it took me so long. And so I can feel the depth of what you do purely by reflecting on my own experience of that particular loss. And I thought I would lose my parents before I lost my husband, for instance, you know. And then my father passed, and then more recently my mother passed in 2021. And so when I think about what came from that, the emotions that came from that, the discussions afterwards with family who were not particularly agreeable, shall we say, about certain things,
Yeah.
who wanted their needs met rather than, either my partner's or my mum's needs met or wishes met. And so I can really get a feel and a sense of the depth of conversations that would be happening, that maybe we're having in our heads, but we're bringing that into a theoretical conversation on our own, without knowing exactly what the other members of the family or friends are going to be bringing to the table at the time of somebody's death, and we're having to deal with it all. And so with your work that you do, I would sense that emotion that's involved has to be really managed in a way that's respectful to each person involved. Do you speak to the families as well as the person who you're working with around their death?
Oh, yes. Yeah. We work with families, and like I said, there's just it just branches off into so many scenarios, like, and people, like, people can hire a doula, and they can utilize a doula in say after a diagnosis, getting a scary diagnosis, terminal diagnosis, whatever. And then some people hire doulas that aren't dying, and they want to do legacy work, and they want to do some pre-planning, and they want to have conversations. They want to use doulas for like bridging conversations, with families or groups of people. Um, and and also, it's also families, absolutely. And sometimes families, utilize the doula first before, because they have someone dying, or something like that, or and then there's sudden deaths. It's like stuff that's not expected, right? So
Mm.
be
And
quite a big.
yeah, you can't actually, in that instance, if it's a sudden death, an unexpected death, you don't get chance to have that type of conversation
Yes.
with a doula.
Yeah. And the conversations aren't had. And so, you know, that's where I'm stressing so much about to people about, you know, just talk to each other, have conversations. And sometimes, you know, there's little things that doulas can do to help, you know, a conversation start and to ease it in, you know, because it's not comfortable. Nobody wants to sit and talk about death. It's not. But the thing is, everybody is inching closer to it every day.
Mhm.
And I'm not joking. I'm not trying to be funny,
No,
but
yeah,
it's true. And I think most people have experienced a sudden death, and it's shocking. And nothing can prepare anybody for that. Not even me or you.
mhm.
But about our own wishes. I mean, if everybody just focused on themselves and worried about that, and, you know, had the conversations and shared some of the ideas and thoughts that they had about, you know, if you know, the end of their lives were to come, you know, it would be so much better, especially because I think a lot of us have experienced loss where you're with your family and you're with your loved ones, and it's just terrible. And a lot of stuff gets missed or skipped or ignored or swept under the carpet. And so that's my goal, is to keep the conversations going.
Yes, those conversations that weren't even spoken about while people were alive.
Exactly.
And then it comes to that point of when they know that their life is shorter than they actually expected. They have an illness or something. So it did you feel it gets, when they come to that point, did those conversations in your experience get easier to talk about, or are they still difficult to talk about? I know from personal experience that if I try and talk about death to my daughter, my youngest daughter, it's kind of, oh, don't talk about that. I don't even want to think that you're never going to be here again or something. So it's really difficult to have that. So do you find that when people have a prognosis, that those conversations are easier to have in your experience?
I think so. I think it all really depends. There's so many different scenarios, and of course generations do, right? I mean, you talk about your daughter, and a lot of people's daughters don't want to have conversations with their moms about stuff like that. And it just depends, you know, it really depends on what a person's been through in their life and where they're at. And if you get a diagnosis, I mean, I've known people at different points in their lives, whether they're older or younger, different life experiences, and then different diagnosis, but ultimate, you know, ending is coming. And it just really depends on where they're at with that. And so it can be really big and scary. I've talked about it being like it's the elephant in the room, you know, and if you talk about it, it eventually disappears out of the room. You know what it's like when there's an elephant in the room. It's like, there it is. No one's gonna, everybody can see it, but no one will say anything about it. And so, I mean, if you keep talking about it, it gets easier.
Mhm.
And you and I just talked about this before we went on live. You know, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the easier, and it just flows easier and better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How is it? I'm just thinking of like people who have a faith or people that have no faith in something after an
Mm-hmm.
afterlife faith or something like that. What kind of conversations happen around that, and is that a major part of the work that you do as a death doula?
Well, and that's one thing that we learned, even that's a part where, and I worked in healthcare all these years, and so you have to, you know, as a caregiver, you have to leave all your stuff at the door when you walk in, and you encounter all kinds of different people with different faiths, and you can't you can't hold anybody for anything, for whatever they believe. So you just have to kind of leave it. And so, what I've tried to do, through my learnings and teachings is I've gone into many different faiths and dug around and tried to understand some of them. And so that I don't feel kind of like, that's the word I'm looking for. If I encounter someone that wants to utilize me, say if they're First Nations, here in Canada, it's really important to understand some of that and not just not have any knowledge, right? Christianity and all that stuff, and being Catholic or Buddhism, like just, so I've tried to educate myself the best I can about different faiths, and you can't, as like I said, as a caregiver, you can't judge or go against it. It just doesn't make any sense to do that. And so if you can just be open and you're just there for the person in every single way, whether it be a faith-based situation, because a lot of it is, it's just part of it, and it has nothing to do with me. It's got nothing to do with me. It has to do with 100% with them. And so, yeah, I've just tried to educate myself as much as I can. There's lots to learn. So
Yes, lots of different faiths,
lots.
beliefs, all of that kind of
For
thing.
sure.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
So Marni, when you're doing this work, is there one common thing, like regret or something that somebody wants to, put out there before they die, before they actually draw breath? Do you have like a common thing that so many people say about their death and what they want to, how they want things to be after they're no longer here, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think a common kind of trend or theme that I've encountered is, people didn't conversate enough. They didn't talk about what they wanted and needed themselves. And so people often, I find, that are in their dying, they don't want to scare or burden or intimidate or make awkward, especially younger people. And I think that that is part of what keeps this kind of stuff hidden underneath stuff, is that, the conversations aren't being had. I think it's really important, and I've helped many people that are in their dying, just to, you feel pretty brave when you're dying. That's one thing that I've really seen is, when they got the word and they've been told, and this is it, and it's coming, then, all kinds of things change for that person. And often there's a lot of stuff that's unsaid. There's estrangement, with families and people, friendships. And so that's one common thing that they regret that they didn't say, fix a friendship, or, you know, get back and talking with that parent, or, restore that sisterhood that got lost. There's a lot of regrets, and mostly it's about conversation and being brave enough to say how people are feeling.
That's those opportunities, that it's like the work you do is like opening a chink of light in a dark space where people can walk through if they choose to, and actually have those really deep and meaningful conversations. So there's no regrets on the people who are left, that they wish they'd said this, they wish they'd done that, they wish they'd, been able to do certain things or say certain things or whatever. So it's really, it's just it feels, conversations like this, I didn't know what to expect having an interview with you talking about death, but actually speaking about it brings up so much that has been like, that is really fascinating, and it's good to have it, because like you said, we're none of us getting any younger, it's coming.
I'm sure
line.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all in a queue, and then one day it'll be our turn. I don't know if you've ever seen that image online where there's a long queue of people, and
I've seen it.
yeah, the one at the front is like flying up into the sky, and it's kind of like
Yeah.
we're getting closer to the front.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a really thought-provoking and really meaningful conversation to have, Marni. So thank you for coming on. I want to just end with what's the joyful part of doing what you do? What do people really love about doing when they work with you? What do they come out and say? What yeah, what's the I would say the joyful part, the good part of that they actually can smile about and, feel at peace with.
I think that, are you talking about like a person in their dying, or are you talking about like a family using a doula? Is that what you mean?
Well, okay, if you can answer that from both perspectives, that'd be wonderful.
I mean, people that have a doula, around that situation, in a situation with their family that is passing away, it just lightens it up. It opens the doors, because it just, when you're in that situation, I think we've all been in that, where you have a family member dying and it just feels like all the doors are closed. And I really feel that doulas help with, keeping the conversations open, keeping everything kind of flowing, and try not to let it be too scary, right? It just takes the scariness off of that, because people fear death, and that's what's not talked about. And so people get uncomfortable and awkward about it, and they don't want to talk about it. And so I think that that's a common thing that people say. It just helps someone that's comfortable around it. It makes it feel better. I don't know if that makes sense at all. But I mean, for me, and I'll flip it over to me, like for me in a situation, it's just, you think about births, and I often talk about, birth and death. They're the bookends of your life, and they're both going to happen. One of them's already happened, and we're sitting here, and the other one's going to come. And you prepare for your birth. Like when you get pregnant and you have a baby, it's prep. The whole family's getting ready. Everybody's prepping. You want to have certain people around. You want to have certain practitioners around. You have an idea on how it might go, right? And it doesn't always go like that. I mean, I had a child, and I wanted, this situation, I had my own ideals about what I wanted. And then, things changed, and it worked out. It's just, it didn't go as exactly how I thought it would go. But I mean, you prep for that, right? That's, a birth, and you prep so you can do the same. And when you're with someone, I mean, just think about it. When you're born and you're having a baby, it's personal and it's private and it's intimate. It's all those exact same things when you're dying. When someone's in their bed, it's personal and it's private and it's intimate, and only certain people are there, as per request of family or whoever the person's dying, their wishes. So it's very similar. And so to be part of that, it's just, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that. And when someone's leaving, it's just so beautiful to be there.
Yes, yeah, I was there I was there, obviously, my husband's death. I was there at my mum's passing over, and I wasn't there for my dad. I was actually at the hospital with my daughter, who had slipped on the ice the day before and was getting a cast on her leg. So I was actually at the hospital with doing that, and my dad passed while I was, I'd been there for weeks as we were, as he was getting weaker and weaker. But on the actual moment of his death, I was actually in the hospital with my daughter getting a cast put on her leg. So, but yeah, there's times when people, I think, would love to have been there but weren't there, and then I would imagine that has to be talked through as well, and what happens if somebody doesn't make it to the bedside and all of those kinds of things, and what can you do? Yeah,
exactly.
Can you
Yeah.
work with people across the globe then? Do you have to be
Yep.
physically present with them or
No.
not?
No, and especially with legacy planning and end of life planning, you know, in your living, you can do that virtually. So, and I also have my Facebook group, the Life, Death and Beyond Network on Facebook. And so, you know, and that's like a little sacred place where people can come and be, because sometimes when you're just out in the Facebook world, you don't really want to, you know, be out in your page talking about that kind of stuff with people. And sometimes it's nice to go and just sit and sometimes watch in the background and just listen to the conversations happening, or the posts or posting. And so that's also good too, right? Because then you can participate, or you don't have to participate. You can just go and just be. Sometimes that's all people need. They don't want to go and do all the out in the world things, you know, in the internet. But yes, I do virtual work and in person. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I was just about to mention your Facebook group. So thank you for dropping that in there. Thank you so much. Yes, so I just want to speak to the audience and just say, I hope you've got something really deep and meaningful from this beautiful conversation that we've had this today with Marni. And please get in touch with her in the comments under this video, and have a look over at her group if it resonates with you and you want to have another similar conversations with other people, maybe going through the same experience as yourself, because we never know. People around us are going through so many different things and needing so many different levels of support and interaction. And I'm just so grateful, Marni, that you've got this group and that you can help other people who are going through what we've just been discussing today. So thank you so much for doing that work.
Thanks, Dee. Thanks for having
welcome.
me here.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone, thank you for watching. If you're watching on replay or live, thank you so much. And Marni will put her group link in the conversation below this, and we will speak to her again, I'm sure. Thank you.
You will. Okay. Bye.